Hello. So I want to talk today about a book I read a couple months ago. I've reread it since then, and I was really busy with work, so I hadn't been making these videos for a while, and here I am. I'm like my second to last day of vacation. And I want to talk about this book. It's called The Secret History of the World. It's done by a guy named Mark Booth. It is the culmination of decades of this guy's work and research into secret societies and the mystery schools. The mystery schools were what we humans did to catalog knowledge as it was being created. There were always, I guess, humans of a scholarly bent. It's not hard to believe. They always tried to find a way to make what they'd learned valuable for the future. The mystery schools collected all sorts of things, from our histories to our evolution. They had their own theory of evolution long before Darwin's theory of evolution, and a far more thorough version of evolution from, and to discuss that is, you could read the book, but they cataloged this information. Apparently, according to our history, let me give you a good example here. I think it was, let me do a quick Google check. Okay, now we're on. I'm still not very good at making these stupid things. Anyways, okay, so if the Greeks had a mystery school, which they did, very sustainable one apparently, and Troy had a mystery school, the Greeks went to war with Troy for control of that information. While at the same time, their mystery school at the time, because it wasn't a secret society yet, recorded that conflict, recorded the building of the Trojan horse as the first time a trick was played by humanity. They recorded the results, and obviously they're the historians of the event because they're the winners. That is a reflection of the kind of work these mystery schools did. Now, there were mystery schools all over the world. India had their own. According to the Secret History of the World, India, I think, is an offshoot of the former Atlantis. Not really relevant to my topic, but it gives you some insight as to the function of these things in our societies, on our planet. Now, you fast forward a bit. See, a part of their evolution is that their faith is that their mind preceded matter. The idea is that creation is the imagination of God. It's experiencing itself. And that experience went from idealistic, evolved through to materialism, which is where we are now, solidified. That evolution solidified us in the material world. Right now, we are experiencing what it's like to be consciousness in a solidified, materialistic world. Let me give you another example of how the depth of how this all works. According to Freemasonic history, in the 1700s, there was this Count de Saint-Germain. His importance to the growth of our consciousness was to add something like, or the actual word, back into our consciousness. But this hadn't been his first time here. One of his previous incarnations was as Hiram Abiff, the dude who built Solomon's temple, and then was murdered, thus taking the word out of our collective consciousness until his reincarnation as Count de Saint-Germain. Now, I'm not giving credence to the history. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that's the way in which these things function, according to the book. That is what they did. They tracked those kinds of changes in our consciousness. Another example would be Job. I'm going to continuously use this reference here. Now, I like how it's changed in my consciousness. For a long time, the book of Job was a very big problem for me because it seemed to me to be just too human to be divine. It didn't make sense that this was a function that would be done intentionally by something with this high of an intelligence. What was the fucking point? Well, according to this book and the histories, that was the first time the idea that life isn't fair was added into the collective consciousness. That is an example of the function and form of these societies. And according to the book, I can give you one of the main societies that we suspect are doing what secret societies do in our world today, is the Freemasons. I was unaware. I mean, I'd always heard of the term Illuminati. I've never researched it. It's not my sort of thing. But when reading this book, it turns out that there were Freemasons, and that the Illuminati were sort of like this society that was created to just sort of hide in plain sight among them with their own agenda, which was a fully materialistic agenda. They called them Illuminated Masons. And their function was to basically get as much power as they could and as much control as they could, doing it while hiding amongst the Masons. That is a part of the secret history of the world. Another thing I found in this is that the history they track is very much about imagination. I consider my side work, this, as trying to advance the state of human consciousness with a stipulation I would really like to do it, not get famous. I want to do it, but not be... Anyways. So what fascinates me is their position on imagination. That creation of consciousness was a form of God expressing his creativity and learning. If God is perfect at everything, how does he effectively be perfect at everything, yet not evil or sinful? According to this model, the second I come up with, let's say, a new widget, this is business terminology, anyway, whatever. I wasted 2 years of my life on business school. All it taught me was I don't want to run a business. Anyways, I should have done philosophy, right? If imagination is what they say it is, if our consciousness is our universe experiencing itself, if their point and purpose is to track and influence the different changes in our consciousness, if imagination is that crucial, then I don't need to do anything except the work. I can sit here, meditate, focus, solve problems, and put it out into the universe. I don't even have to record it for YouTube. Just simply uttering it, apparently, is enough to add it to the collective consciousness. I imagine the difference being impact. Just uttering it without a camera is just uttering it without a camera. It's out there. It's likely in the generic stage, like it's in the Star Trek stage or something, right? But once you say it, now you're writing for Star Trek. Now you're adding it more powerfully into the human consciousness. What I am adding is a definition and what it means to have it defined. But the cool thing I got from the book was that I only have to imagine it to have that effect. What I do with it after that will just change the amount of effect I have. the only thing that could motivate me to do this. So that's imagination. All right, so let's talk about timelines. So one of the things the secret histories hold to be part of our history is that when Jesus was here, he had a purpose. Not only that, but he was actually a reincarnation or an incarnation, which I think is still compatible with Christianity. But, I mean, well, they got it from, anyways. What his function was here and how he described it was he's about his Father's business. His Father's business was to introduce a change to our collective consciousness. This change had to be made in such a way that they came up with a plan. I don't know if there was a boardroom meeting where they came up with a plan. I don't think it works that way. If that helps you visualize it, okay. His Father's work, I've only read through Matthew right now. I'm still working on the New Testament. But from what I can tell, was to point out that what we believed before was not entirely accurate. What he did to do that was, it seemed like check off a checklist of things to say, look, I know what's going on. I know the history of this world. You want prophecy fulfilled? Here you go. I'll check some boxes for you. Most of what he did besides that was ministration. He wanted to introduce something new. The plan was to introduce that something new, knowing it would be controversial and hard to adapt to the way our consciousness was then. What he was introducing was a new type of interior lifestyle. He was introducing empathy. His Father's work was for him to live his life ministering to people and introducing empathy. When he says he was about his Father's work, that is his Father's work. For me, when I understood that that's what this book was telling me, for me, it set off a red flag of confirmation bias. Because even prior to me reading this book, I had said that was the point of Jesus' time here on earth. That was already something I had understood. So it smacked to me of something I needed to really think about, reflect on, before I just... It's confirmation. But I had to read it as confirmation bias until I could work through it. I suspected that was the case. But here I find that there were actual societies. It was their function in our consciousness to record that as that. Crazy. Good book. All right, so think about the slow burn of empathy into our consciousness, because the Dark Ages were a bitch. Our understanding and knowledge was stunted. Our leaders were not really able to grasp what it was that the change that was happening. I don't think our leadership as human beings understood the change, especially since their consciousness was smothered by this need to survive. And this, according to the secret histories, this coming from idealistic to materialistic existence. So the Dark Ages, being so protracted, were a part of the function of assimilating empathy. And as we did so, our evolution was solidifying into materialism. The things that were more idealistic about our faiths became harder to accomplish. Priests were less magical. That's simple enough. Till we got to a time where all that spiritual side seems to be less important. It isn't growing so much in our consciousness. And I think that is reflected in the church historically. given some of the actions the churches themselves took. Think about it this way, though. The big churches are obviously more vulnerable to bigger mistakes. They're also more vulnerable to this need to survive and then the interior culture of success. So no matter priest or not, ego is still present, especially if you don't have a name for it or an understanding of its function, as we didn't back then. Those things were not part of our consciousness yet. So this protracted period leading to what we have now is a fully materialistic world. Is there any wonder that the wonder is all selfish now? Was that the goal? Is this just part of the process of what we'll eventually understand better later on? I don't know. But that was the impression the book left me on that subject. That our spirituality was being hardened into materialism. Our idealism was becoming materialism. More and more and more until we get where we are now. All right. There is one more. This is going to be a series of 3 videos. This one is going to be sort of like a book report on it, okay? Would you want to read it? This is what I got from it. The second video I've already made because I was able to make that one before this one. I don't really work off of bullet points or scripts. I do what I can when I can. So this is the conclusion of the first one. So I have one more video to do. And I want to talk, I've been putting off the subject of sex for a very, very long time because it's a very odd time for humanity when it comes to sex, at least from my perspective. And it's hard to touch a subject like that and not come across as a creepy uncle type. And I don't really have use for that. Also, hypothetically, it could be seen and that could have influences that I'm not exactly looking for. I mean, I have coworkers and family that watch this stuff, and I don't really want to talk about sex in front of them. But the other topic in this book that really touched me was the sexual practices of these societies, mystery schools. So there's going to be this one. This is the book report. The other one is, the second one's already been made. That's sort of an address to anybody who might happen to watch this and be a part of these things. And then video 3 will be on the sex. That's what I'm going to go and create now. I don't know, hopefully it was interesting for you.